Testing.
Thank you. All right, let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to the June 21st, 2023 Summer Solstice edition of the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting. And it's National Indigenous Peoples Day, where we celebrate the history, heritage, resilience, and diversity of our First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people across Canada. But here in the Cowichan Valley, I respectfully, and we all respectfully acknowledge that we live here on the traditional territories of a number of First Nations, so the Quw'utsun, Malahat, the Subasset, Halalt, Penelakut, Suminis, Liaxon, Pakwachin, Dididat, and Pachidat peoples. And we are grateful for their care of the earth and their teachings, and we hope we are able to respectfully bring those teachings to the work that we do here in this committee. And so with that, I will turn to our corporate secretary.
Madam Chair, if I might, I want to reintroduce our acting deputy corporate officer, Alison Boyd, who is going to be your parliamentarian today. So this is the only words that you're going to get from me this afternoon.
Good thing.
Keeping in mind, she's got training wheels on. She has the sign trainee on her lapel, so I think everything is good. But I'd like to introduce again Alison Boyd, who is our acting deputy corporate officer. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Alison. Great to have you.
Without further ado, number one, approval of the agenda.
Any errors or omissions? Can I have a motion to approve? And seconded, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you. Number two, adoption of the minutes of the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of June 7th, 2023.
Right, any errors or omissions? Moved, seconded, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you. Number three, business arising from minutes.
None?
Madam Chair, given some recent developments and information come to light, I'd like to move to close per Section 90 of the Community Charter, Section K, negotiations and discussions on a proposed service.
So that's been moved. Do I have a seconder? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. So we're going to move into close briefly, and then we will reopen the meeting after that's finished. Is that correct? Okay.
So unfortunately, those that are in
That's why we're locked.
Where were that source from?
I don't know, but I thought it was pretty deep.
Yeah, very deep. How old?
7.
Wow.
public here, you may want to do that. We'll just wait for the video.
I think it's on.
Is it running?
Yep.
Okay.
Welcome back, everyone. So on with the agenda. It's public input period, I believe. So we welcome public input at this time. If you'd like to speak, come up to the microphone, please. And there's a little green light that will show you have 3 minutes. Please state your name and turn the microphone on. Yes, press the button. And speak into the microphone. Turn it to
Hello? A question, just to start. Okay, no question. All right.
My item that I'm speaking to, I'm Jackie Barker from Area C, Cobble Hill. My item I'm speaking to is the staff report on the curbside collection. The report contains serious flaws which make the data fit the conclusion instead of fair and accurate data, leading to a logical conclusion, with the result of dismissing, disqualifying, discounting, and putting up barriers for pan disposal. Examples on page 3 of the report, quote, considering the CVRD is already providing recycling and garbage collection in the electoral areas, that is untrue. The CVRD is not providing garbage collection in 54% of the electoral area population, areas ABC. The CVRD and PAN provide a hybrid service. Disqualifying example, the false statement above is used as the rationale for considering only organics for private collection in a hybrid model. As a result, PAN's current model becomes immediately ineligible for consideration. Placing barriers on page 5, choosing an RFP process instead of grandfathering would assure PAN's demise, and discounting on page 3 and 4. Hired consultants investigated 7 jurisdictions outside of the CVRD to compare public and private service models. Many problems were identified, but none of these applied to PAN. And no information seems to have been gathered within the CVRD, PAN's disposals, actually outstanding performance, despite being highly endorsed at least twice when under siege by the CVRD. Only problems from other areas are mentioned and used in the decision to go with a public model. This is a transition. Democracy is messy, with only 2.6% of the population in the electoral areas deciding some things for all. An example is the 900 votes that have come out of the second survey that was done, and the population is over 34,000 in the regional area. So that's 2.6%. The South Cowichan public is feeling ignored. What would the BC government and the court system think of this report? So I respectfully urge you to amend the report to provide a hybrid service model for areas A, B, and C, to grandfather in PAN disposal, to negotiate in good faith a contract that is financially feasible for PAN, and regarding those trucks, order 2 of them with a possible third later, saving $500,000 plus costs likely incurred by forcing this small business to close. And to finish, I just want you to know that the following names from the ABC areas endorse and support those recommendations that I just mentioned. They are Robin Brett, Roger Painter, Maureen Alexander, David Slade, Gay Wise, Ian Lowe, Jerry Giles, Fiona Benson, Francis Hugo, and Isabel Beauchamp. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you for your input. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Welcome, Cliff.
Madam Chair, I'm Cliff Evans from Shawnigan Lake. Madam Chair, on today's...
Cliff, just move your microphone over. Perfect. Thank you.
Madam Chair, on today's agenda is the R2, and that's the St. John's Academy new rezoning application, and they've really put out an excellent brochure. And on this brochure, and on the staff report, they have referrals. And just a couple of weeks ago, we had the improvement district in here because they hadn't been asked to be referrals to a subject. And again, I do not see them on the referral notice. They are on the old referral notice in attachment E, but we all know from last week's or a couple of weeks ago that we need to let our first responders and our firefighters in as referrals, because there can be a road that's too narrow or whatever, and they can rectify that so our people will be safe. Another thing that I noticed in the brochure was that they have rail trail, and that made a lot of people happy when they saw that in Shawnigan Lake. Does the CVRD or St. John's Academy know something that we don't know? Is there going to be a rail trail? So maybe that can come out in your meeting today. The other thing I wish to talk about was R6. And that was on your application for $50,000 for community dialogue or conversations on areas A, B, and C. I think I've stated this before, that we have problems with more than A, B, and C. I think that I've stated, and you know because you live in Area E, that we have people from Area B living on the west side of the Kokosala, and they have to go through, to attend a meeting in Shawnigan Lake, they have to go through Area E, D, C, and then back to B. And this is crazy. We need to include all these people in these discussions. And so before we jump to this, I would say that this should be referred, and we should, the directors should have a conversation about how we affect all the regional districts. Also, area F and E have problems too. So there you go. We can include area F in there too. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Hi there, Sheila Bell
Welcome.
Irving. Shawnigan Lake property of 82 years in my family. Annual taxes of $11,716. Yes, $11,716 I pay in property taxes every year. Now, you want to add another $300 to it for garbage disposal removal, which I personally won't use because I learned from my grandmother to reuse, repurpose, and recycle as much as I can. And I might put out 6 bags of garbage a year. At that point, it'll be about $50 a bag. That's a little extreme when I can take it to Fisher Road for $9. You'll basically be raising my taxes now to $12,000 a year. So basically, I am paying $1,000 a month to the CVRD in the province. So I'm going to consider you my landlords that just take my money and go buy a Porsche. The problem with the CVRD taking over the garbage is it is probably going to be unreliable as the recycling is. Now, when the recycling's not picked up, that's people just go out and roll their bin back in again. But if garbage isn't picked up, we have bears, and the bears love our garbage. And when the bears start getting into the garbage, we're going to have dead bears, because a fed bear is a dead bear. How many bears are going to be culled because the truck might break down or the garbage is left on the side of the road and the bears go, yum, yum, yum. So it's not acceptable for the CVRD, I believe, to go in and take out a long-time family business that has been serving the community for many, many years. Personally, Tyler has helped me out many times when I had stuff dumped in front of my house by the people that were mad at me for fighting a toxic soil dump. Tyler came in, volunteered his time, and took all the garbage away for me, and I really appreciate that. Will the CVRD do that? Probably not. Now, Tyler is well established in the community, and he has been there for many, many years, and he does a good job. All our garbage is picked up if it's put out. I personally don't use the system, but I appreciate the fact that all my neighbors do, and their garbage is gone. I compost on my property. That is gold to me. Like, I live on a conifer forest, which you don't get soil. So my compost is my soil. So I'm not going to be giving it to Pan. Or to the CVRD. I'm going to be keeping it for myself. So I just don't think it's right that people should be losing their businesses because the CVRD sees an income stream that they want to get involved in. And I think that it should be just left alone. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, let's move on.
Thank you, Chair. We have no delegations, so we move to 6, correspondence. C1, grant and aid request, Electoral Area B, Shawnigan Lake, Cobble Hill Event Society. Recommendation that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area B, Shawnigan Lake, in the amount of $1,000 be provided to the Cobble Hill Event Society to support music in the park.
I have a mover and a seconder. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you. C2, grant and aid request, Electoral Area D, Cowichan Bay, Cobble Hill Event Society. The recommendation that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid for Electoral Area D, Cowichan Bay, in the amount of $750 be provided to the Cobble Hill Event Society to support Music in the Park 2023.
I have a mover and a seconder. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you. C3, grant and aid request, Electoral Area D, Cowichan Bay, Cowichan Bay Improvement Association. That it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid, Electoral Area D, Cowichan Bay, in the amount of $500 be provided to the Cowichan Bay Improvement Association to support the 35th Annual Wooden Boat Festival at the Cowichan Bay Maritime Center.
I have a mover and a seconder. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you. C4, grant and aid request, Electoral Area E, Cowichan Station, Satlam, Glenora, Cobble Hill Event Society. That it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid for Electoral Area E, Cowichan Station, Satlam, Glenora, in the amount of $300 be provided to the Cobble Hill Event Society to support Music in the Park 2023.
I have a mover and a seconder. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you. And C5, grant and aid request, Electoral Area I, Yubo, Mead Creek, Cowichan Lake District Chamber of Commerce. Bless you. That it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area I, Yubo, Mead Creek, in the amount of $3,750 be provided to the Cowichan Lake District Chamber of Commerce to support funding for the Chamber Mobile Business Tourism Unit.
Director Deck moves it. Do I have a seconder? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Yes, Director Wilson.
If I could make a very quick comment, please. Thanks to those directors who have provided money for CHES and the and Music in the Park. For those of you who haven't been yet, it's a brilliant thing. Starts on July the 7th. Got some great acts lined up. Bring your dogs, bring your families, bring your children, bring your deck chairs and your picnics. And I guarantee a great Thursday evening every month. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Great. Thanks, Director Wilson. Number 7, information. No information. And 8, reports. We have report from the Development Services Division, reapplication number SA22D07. This is for 1780 V Road, PID 003630617.
Welcome, Mr. Buchan.
Thank you. And next slide, please. Parcel frontage exemption request has been submitted for the property at 1780 V Road. Next slide, please. When subdividing land, Section 5121A of the Local Government Act establishes a minimum frontage requirement of 10% of the perimeter of each lot to have highway access. The Local Government Act also allows local governments to exempt parcels from this 10% minimum frontage requirements. If approved, the proposed panhandle lot, which is shown on the site plan here as Lot B, would have a frontage of 4.5%. No recommended changes to the proposed lot configuration have been identified by the provincial approving officer. The staff recommendation is to approve the requests. On page 3 of the report, there's some information about the breakdown. It says 4.4%. It should read 4.5%. And there's also a figure to show what these smaller lots, the smaller access lots could look like. The applicant is in the room if you have any questions.
Would Ms. Fudge or Mr. Merritt like to add anything? Yeah, please come to the come to the microphone. So you're recorded.
No, I don't have much else to add. We have all the paperwork in order here for the other, part of it, but it's pretty straightforward of what, Mr. Duncan was mentioning here, and I don't have anything really to add.
Okay.
So, you have any question? No?
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions for the applicant? Nope. That's great, thank you.
Good, thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Buchan? Or staff, other staff?
I think this is more of a management question. I can't think of one example of where we have denied this type of request. And we discuss often efficiencies and the process of for applicants going through this process. Is this an item that's going to be delegated to staff in the future?
Ms. Charles?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the decision on frontage waiver could either be delegated to staff or could also be delegated to the provincial approving officer. So that's an option for the board to consider in the future.
Follow up?
So is there a need for a motion then for it to be brought back for discussion, or, because I think this comes up often, and it would help speed some applications if we were to delegate this to staff.
So you would like to make a motion that staff come back with a report on this?
Yeah, I think we
Ms.
should
Terrell?
delegate this task as quick as possible.
Madam Chair, so the delegation has to be done by bylaw. So if you wish to delegate the authority, you'd have to amend the bylaw that was just actually adopted last week by the board, 4483, to include a provision around delegation of authority for this particular item. But I would recommend that you deal with the application on the floor, and then if you want to deal with the delegation question, you could do that through another resolution.
Absolutely, I'll do that.
Director Abbott?
I'd like to move the adoption of this bylaw.
It's been moved and seconded. Any more discussion? Director McClinton, you wanted to talk? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. So this will go to the next board meeting? Oh, it's a variance thing. Does it go to the board? Yeah, it does. So it goes to the next board meeting, Mr. Merritt. So the next board meeting is next week. And we'll look at it again and probably go, yep. Probably. No guarantees. Okay, next one.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
could I make a motion that staff come back with a report with their recommendation as to whether these types of applications be delegated to staff or to the approving officer?
You can make that motion. Do I have a seconder? Anyone like to discuss that? I know that I had an application where I greatly the issue of road frontage became quite a hot topic. It can be useful for protecting things for other reasons. So it is not just a straightforward issue, although I get where you're coming from. I'll call the question. All in favor? Anyone opposed? The motion's carried.
Thank you, Chair. We are on R2, report from the Development Services Division, reapplication RZ 20B02 2371 Shawnigan Lake Road, PIDs 007 708 645 005 045 495 005 092 132 003 455 874 001 033 301 and 008 58611 and 008 587
Welcome, Ms. Boyle. You've been busy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe there's a presentation, but maybe while we're waiting for the presentation, I just want to acknowledge that seeing as it's National Indigenous Peoples Day, that the land use application that I'm going to present and all the land use applications that you receive before you are on the unceded territories of First Nations peoples. So it's good to think about. So presented before you is application number RZ20B02, which is the zoning and official community plan amendment for St. John's Academy in Shawnigan Lake. The zoning and OCP amendment application has been altered since the original proposal as a result of significant community engagement and correspondence with external agencies. The applicant is currently proposing to rezone 7 parcels owned by the private school from the various existing zones to P1 to match the parcel on which the main school facility is located. An OCP amendment is also required to redesignate the parcels to the institutional, local, and regional land use designation. Next slide. We can stay here. The applicant, St. John's Academy, owns several parcels, a number of parcels fronting Shawnigan Lake Road and Stowood Road. Currently, the private school facility is located on 2 parcels with civic address 2371 Shawnigan Lake Road. The parcels not occupied by the school are currently a mix of residential and vacant land, and the property to the southeast behind the school facilities is used for sewage disposal. The application consists of a zoning amendment and an OCP amendment. The purpose of the zoning amendment is to support the expansion of the school by accommodating approximately 200 additional local students beyond the current school capacity and by adding kindergarten to grade 3 programming. A parking lot is proposed on the northern parcel with a shuttle bus that will run from the northern parking area to the main school. The development proposal also includes expansion and upgrades to the existing on-site wastewater treatment system to a Class A system. Water servicing is proposed through a surface water license from Shawnigan Lake, and an application has been made to the province. The applicant is committed to working with local First Nations, Cowichan tribes, namely Cowichan tribes and Malahat Nation, who've both provided in-depth referral responses, noting the cultural significance of the area. The applicant has since initiated a reconciliation plan and intends to include representation from local First Nations to support the design, programming, curriculum, and assist with archaeological assessments. The applicant is offering several community amenities with the proposed rezoning. The applicant is proposing to work with the Parks and Trails Division to cover all fees related to construction of a trail between the main campus and the proposed southern campus. Further development of the waterfront green space is proposed, with the green space being publicly accessible through a right-of-way or other legal agreement. The applicant is also offering public use of school facilities for public and recreational purposes during non-peak times through a covenant or other legal alternative. Next slide, please. So as the current zoning amendment proposal has changed significantly since the original proposal, staff are recommending that the application be re-referred to the external agencies for further comment, and particularly to the Advisory Planning Commissions and the Parks Advisory Commission for comment.
Thank you, Ms. Boyle. Is the applicant here?
Yes. Do you want to speak?
Would you like to add anything?
Good
Welcome
afternoon.
back.
Thank you. It's good to see you, many of you in person. My name is Holly Sobdy. I'm an urban planner. I work with a company called Urban Strategies. I'm working with Tom, the owner of the school, and Netta, who's with us helping with community engagement and outreach. We're excited to be here. We think the school has the ability to continue to integrate in a meaningful way with the community. We think the expansion is needed. We've heard that very clearly through our engagement. Parents would like to see K through 3 added to the existing school, which only offers 4 through 12. So that's primarily what the school is hoping to do here. And as Ms. Boyle mentioned, the capacity is through local student capacity being able to attend this school. So really that's what we're hoping to do. In terms of the design, we have a really exciting design. We're going to be able to progress further if we can get the zoning in place and then start working towards development permits. We're working right now with the Malahat as well as the Cowichan tribes have shown interest on a reconciliation strategy. We not only want to design a building that meets the community's needs, but also integrates the needs of the local First Nations, both in terms of design, program, curriculum, and obviously the archaeology requirements that are going to be required further on into the process. So all of that to say is thank you for your consideration, and we're here to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Does the committee have any questions for staff or Mr. Sobdi? Director Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, question for staff. Chloe, I have no problems with seeing this go forward as outlined by the staff here. I don't see any financial considerations here. Is there going to be much of a change on the taxation base here as to what's being paid now and what could be being paid if it's approved?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Director Wilson. Perhaps there's a question for one of my managers that I'm not, or
Through the chair to Director Wilson, yes, there will be, because it will depend on what the province does with the rezoning and how the school gets set up. Because we looked at Brentwood and Shawnigan and how they were, and they have parts that are residents that does get taxed, but the other parts that are to do with the institution and the school don't. So that would all depend on what the province does. So yes, it will have to, it will filter out to the rest of Area B for that catch-up of that extra tax.
Yes, please.
Yeah, and I thought there would be a change, and I suspect that it's going to be a change downward as to what was being paid and what is being paid now. And that worries me slightly, in as much as somebody else is going to have to make up the shortfall. A question probably from the school, and I see that you are offering a lot of local amenities to the public, which is great. Thank you very much for that. Would there be any plans, you know what's coming next, don't you? Would there be any plans to compensate for the loss of that taxation income to the regional districts?
Microphone, sorry.
There we go. Of course, it's got to glow. On the taxation front right now, approximately $90,000 per year taxation towards the CVRD from the existing school. Now, the expansion we expect would also contribute. But what I would ask is, Tom, would you like to add anything on the taxation front? Yeah, okay. So there is the property tax aspect. In terms of the new zoning, I mean, what we are looking for is to make the entire school consistent. That's the gist of what we're doing. Part of the school right now is zone P1, part of it's zoned residential. So not only is the expansion going to be accommodated, but the existing uses will be accommodated by just bringing it all into the P1. So that's really part of what we're trying to achieve here.
And Director Segal?
Thank you. I have a question for staff. I was on the APC for Area A when the first application came through, and it was a joint APC. So I'm just wondering, this one refers just to Area B. I'm wondering when are joint APCs appropriate? And yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Director Segal. Through the chair, you can always request that it go back to the joint APC if you would like to see it go there as well.
Yes, please.
I guess I'm looking for more guidance around when that's appropriate, because this is fully in Area B, right? So what are joint APCs only ever triggered by directors requesting, or are there other things?
As I understand it, and my managers can step in if I'm wrong, in the South Cowichan official community plan, that was the joint OCP, prior to the harmonized official community plan, anything within a village area would go to the specific APC, and anything within a rural area would go to the joint, but not both. But, and the intention of the harmonized official community plan, I think, at the time, there was discussions around having an APC for the entire region, but all the APCs stay the same. So now it's really kind of discretionary whether something goes to the joint or to the specific local one. So,
Director Atkin, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I have a few questions and comments. Thank you for the taxation question, Director Wilson. I think maybe we need more clarity on how it would change and who would set it for maybe when these go to the APC and parks, et cetera. I tried to figure out, so actually to St. John's, I appreciate that you've scaled down your application considerably. And I can't say for sure that it's going to still appear scaled down to the community. But I couldn't figure out how many borders are in this new proposal. And also, I'm very concerned about all the sources of water. So maybe the applicant could talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
Madam Chair, just if I might interrupt, the microphone, and we're live streaming, and so I've noticed that the camera that you're actually on is on the laptop. And if you could move to your right, and you can always move the microphone closer, and it's already interrupted, but we're missing the mic and your face on there. And we're live streaming, and that's why we asked for the microphone and be in front of the camera. Thank you.
Okay, one of these times I'm going to get it right. Thank you. Okay, to your questions, two things. There are no additional boarding facilities proposed. This is 200 local student capacity as part of the expansion. The student capacity coming from adding grades K through 3 to the existing 4 through 12. So no additional boarding is proposed. So right now, there's capacity for around 200 boarders. On the water side of things, I would just say that Mecca Laney is our engineering consultant that's been working with us. We're trying to take an approach that's as light on the land as possible on both the water and the septic side. So maybe I'll just say that right now the school is pulling from both a well as well as the lake. We are proposing, given the situation of being able to draw from both, we're proposing actually to switch to lake water entirely. And we have a license request into the province for about 6 months now to secure that water for the expansion, which would be a total of about 550 students overall. From the septic point of view, we would love it if there was a community system that we could hook into at this point. And we're designing it to be able to hook in the future if that is an option. But at this point, we want to do the best we can, which is offer a Class A septic system, which is as good or better than a community system that could be available.
Thank you. Can I follow up? Yes, so thank you on the comments of the sewer system. I agree so far on that front. And thank you to St. John's for providing kindergarten to grade 3. I think it is a service that the community does need, and I think it's really nice to have, well, we haven't discussed tuitions, so I hope that the tuitions would stay the same. It's certainly nice to have an affordable option for private school for the local community and for the whole area. And I do hear lots of appreciation about that. I'm gonna disagree with your water comments, or maybe, like, I think, I'm gonna step back a little bit. First of all, thank you for attempting to see what the community would want in amenities, but kind of disagreeing on some of them as maybe not, won't be quite viewed as such an amenity as you may think. One being the water and your water use. The community, for the future of our community, it's best to be hooked up to community water, and we do have community water. So I don't know if this will be approved, but I'm going to be recommending that we, when we send this back, that you continue to work with staff to make that a reality. And the trail as an amenity, as it stands right now, it's really not a community amenity. It's kind of a thing that the school needs to figure out. I also, the waterfront park, or waterfront piece, the community has stated really loud and clear that communal spaces are the way to go, and so working with parks to make, so our two major amenity things that the community is looking for when it comes to development on the lake is public access and protection of our water. So in the end, and being aware of how much water we have in the area. Shawnigan Lake School was trucking in water until November last year, and then other areas a little further away from the lake. And right now the lake is lower than it's supposed to be at this time of year too. So, you know, we do have a lot of concerns on our lake, on our water quantity in the area. One more question I do have is, I looked at the map, and as it stands now, if, without those properties, it's kind of a, not the best case scenario design. And so do you have future planning and future plans for kind of making it more whole than patchwork-ish?
You're referring to the three
The empty,
homes?
yeah, like empty spots so that it's more cohesive.
I can speak to that, and Tom as well has been speaking to the owners of the homes, and what I can say is we've went to quite some effort to think of this as a contiguous site that is really connected with the trail that would be built along the rail right-of-way. And doing so in a way that is accessible, so the slopes are manageable, that it's easy to walk between, and it's about a 90-second walk if you were to actually go from the existing campus to the proposed additional building to the south. So it is very, very close. The challenge we faced around the connection, I think, was more around if those neighbors were interested in selling to the school wanted to have that conversation, but they weren't. So we wanted to make the most of that and make sure that in terms of the setbacks, the landscaping, we were working with those neighbors to make sure that they were happy with the proposal, or as much as possible at least. So we had a lot of conversation on that front. The second thing I would just point out as well, which I think is important, Ms. Boyle did mention around the parking to the north. We also are proposing parking as part of the new school. So there will be parking on both sites. That way it is easy to get to whether you're driving or walking. And we're hoping that, you know, through these measures, that it will be one cohesive school at the end of the day. And in terms of the public amenity, if I can just really quickly, we're talking to your staff about how to treat that waterfront green space, because right now it's a surface parking lot. The community's come to us and said, is there any way to green that up and allow public access? The school's responded by saying, yeah, we think that's a possibility. So we'd love to have a conversation about how to do that.
Director Morrison?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if this helps or not, but when I read the staff report and looked at the recommendation, I thought this was going to be about sending it out to referral agencies, not the debate of the matter before us.
I think we're just asking questions right now.
Okay, fair enough.
Director Agden?
Kind of nice to have this information before it goes to referral. Also, a question about, there's two heritage concerns or items that the community would like to ensure that it's part of the discussion of preserving the gym, which was part of the Strathcona Girls' School.
My mom went there.
Yes.
Oh, is that right?
And it's still, the gym floor is still intact, and I'm not sure about the rest of the building, but it's quite original. And E.J. Hughes' home, I believe the school is also on the property, which was his home. So maybe a future fine arts building or something, gallery.
So what I can say at this point, you know, we're eager to get into the design and start thinking about how these buildings can be used and the programs specifically within each building. I think what we're hoping to do at this point is ensure that the zoning can allow us to get into that level of detail through a development permit process. So I think at this point, what we're trying to do is again, just establish school zoning for the site, and then we're absolutely happy to have those conversations. What I can say on the existing site, the intent is not to remove any of those buildings. It's in fact to reinvest in the buildings and then add the new building to the south where it's showing up in the plans that Ms. Boyle presented.
Okay. I'm prepared to move a recommendation if you would like.
Just before you do, I would like to go back to the comment that was made in public input period about referral agencies. So do we have a complete list of referral agencies in the report, or should we be adding the emergency responders and the community water system folks, whoever they are?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The list of referral agencies is in the staff report, but you can add the emergency first responders and the water district.
So, okay, so take
So
that
add that
under
to the
advisement,
resolution.
whoever's moving this motion. And Director Martin, did you want to speak or just second it? Okay. Okay, I'll turn to Director Acton.
I'm just looking for options. I'd like to amalgamate 1 and 2 so that, or I guess it's not really amalgamating it, being referred back to staff, but option 1, but also with the discussions with staff on creating the waterfront as a public park and a connection with the community water system and the heritage, preservation of our heritage buildings, at least somehow preserved in the designs.
Did you catch that?
Thank you.
And do I have a seconder for that? Any more discussion? Director Segal?
Did we add those emergency management
Yes.
groups? Oh, that was in there, okay.
Yep. Yes, you may.
And to Director Segal's questions about the Area B versus the South Cowichan or the joint APC, from previous experience, I think this is a really important application to the community. And so the more Area B representatives on it, I think the better, because they have that history and knowledge and they really pull up their sleeves and get into it. So I appreciate it going to the Area B for sure.
And should it go to the Area A as well? Is that not necessarily? Okay.
It's more necessary when it's kind of all like
Okay.
Arc Road or something, like
Okay,
halfway there.
let's read the motion and then we can we can vote on it.
I'm in training, remember?
We're testing.
So I heard option 1 with the discussion with staff creating the waterfront as the public park and connection with the community water system, discussion with the emergency responders, and keeping the heritage preservation of the buildings. Great.
Is that okay? For staff to work on those other things? Yeah, okay. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. All right. We can have a short break, yes, definitely. Be back at 5:03, please. Welcome back. We're moving on to a couple of Parks and Trails reports that I think are fairly easy.
Great, thank you, Chair. R3, report from the Parks and Trails Division, renewal of a license of occupation agreements for Gibson's, Cairn Park, Skinner Road Beach Access, Boulder Point Beach Access, and Blue Heron Park.
Welcome, Ms. Soroka.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The report in front of you is to seek approval to renew 4 existing license of occupation agreements between the CBRD and the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to continue managing the following parks for a further 5-year term. We've got Gibson's Park in Electoral Area B, which is where the Cairn is located, Skinner Road Beach Access and Boulder Point Beach Access in Electoral Area G, and Blue Heron Park in Electoral Area H. The recommendation is before you.
Any questions? Director Marvin.
Just a comment before I move this. It's just that Area H would be happy to occupy the Westby Road Blue Heron for the next 5 years. I'd like to make the motion to move this.
Seconded? Any comments, discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Are you on to the next one too? No. No, okay.
Chair, we're on R4, report from the Parks and Trails Division, release renewal for Yellow Point Park, Electoral Area H, North Oyster Diamond. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name's Mark Vandendungen.
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 Dungan?
Dungan, yep.
Like the, okay, like the farm people
Like
I
the farm
know.
people.
Okay.
Dutch farmers, yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a new Parks and Trails planner here at the CVRD. So I've spoken to a couple of you along the way, but good to meet the rest of you. I'll just briefly discuss the report here. The purpose of the report is to seek approval to renew the provincial lease for a further 30-year term for Yellow Point Park in Electoral Area H. This park has a 50-year history with the community in this area. It has been an appreciated nature area for the local community and one of the few parks that offer a mix of natural ecological features and such as like Gary oak trees, arbutus trees, and an open flower meadow that people appreciate in the springtime. If the lease renewal is approved by the board, preemptive work would commence preparing a management plan for the park. It's just a simple management plan that's expected from the BC province. And this is a part of the lease renewal process that they'll anticipate this information. And this management plan for Yellow Point Park will be brought back to the board after submitting, or prior to submitting the documents to the province for review. And I'm here to answer any questions about this, and the recommendation is before you as well.
Thank you, Mr. Vandendungen. This is a beautiful park. Director Martman.
It is a beautiful park, and one of the gems of it, it also backs onto ecological reserve. So, you know, it's just, yeah, a win-win. So I would like to make the motion to move this. Thank you.
And it's been seconded. Any comments, discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
R5.
R5, report from Recycling and Waste Management Division, Electoral Area 3, stream curbside collection service delivery.
I can speak to that.
Also, oh, great, you're there. Ms. Sarady's here on the screen. Please go ahead.
So thank you very much. So this staff report is in regards to the implementation of three-stream curbside collection. As the decision about whether or not the CVDA should implement the three-stream curbside collection has already been made when the solid waste management plan was approved by the board and the ministry. Today's decision is about implementing a hybrid or a fully public three-stream curbside collection service. So the purpose of the report is to do that and also provide you with an update on the next steps of the three-stream curbside program. And the recommendation to the board is that the three-stream garbage, recycling, and organics curbside collection service that will be implemented in Cowichan Valley Regional District electoral areas as per the 2018 Solid Waste Management Plan be a CVRD operated and delivered service. Can also provide a little bit of background as we received some feedback today.
I'd appreciate that.
Okay. So as garbage and recycling collection is currently provided by unionized CVRD staff, we've only been able to consider two service options. One being a hybrid service with the organics pickup for over 13,000 households being contracted out to a private business, as that would be considered a new service under the union rules. Or a fully public service where all waste streams are collected by the CVRD. While considering a hybrid service, we have done research and sought feedback from solid waste consultants, service providers, including other regional districts and municipalities. What we learned is that the preference is to have one service provider, and a key reason for that is that it's more efficient. So under a hybrid service, you would have two trucks that would service each household every week. So the contractor under a hybrid service would provide organics collection, and then on the same week, the CVRD would come to pick up either garbage or recycling depending on the week. This is particularly inefficient in our big regional district with lower density. So an alternative to that would be to have one service provider using a split truck that could pick up 2 waste streams at the same time. However, providing a hybrid service would provide potential business opportunities for private companies. It is important to understand, though, that especially in the context of the public feedback that we received, that the process to obtain a private contractor can only be done through an open and competitive bid process. So under such a process, all qualified bidders may bid for the organics collection. And at this time, we know there are several potential companies that provide waste collection services, including some larger companies like GFL, Mterra, and Waste Connection. As for next steps, to procure the required, well, through our process to procure the replacement trucks for our old curbside trucks, we learned that there is a rapid increase in equipment costs and there's very long delivery times as well. So to keep costs as low as possible for our residents when we implement the service in 2025, it's important that we order these trucks as soon as possible. And this is why we need to decide on a hybrid versus a public service soon. In the next couple of months, we'll also come to you with the results of the public consultation, the last phase of the public consultation, that is, on the preferred service option. So 1 being food waste only with garbage and recycling, or 2 being commingled yard and food waste with garbage and recycling, with the potential to add glass collection. So right now, our consultant is working to compile all of the results. If the latter with glass collection were to be selected, there's a possibility to contract out the glass collection to the entire region. That would mean a monthly pickup service using a smaller haul-all type truck. Last but not least, as part of planning the service rollout, we will be researching best practices for opt-out options, preventing wildlife conflicts, as well as many of the other considerations that we received during the public consultation. All of this work will be completed in 2024 in preparation for the 2025 rollout. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Sarady, Director Morrison?
I was going to move the recommended resolution, and if there was a seconder, speak to it.
Well, let's just see if there's any questions first. Director Wilson?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ilse. I'm sorry, Ms. Sarady. This is one of the things that I find a little bit unsettling is that the CBRD already has 168 functions. It's probably the highest number of functions of any regional district in BC. And I've been looking for some way of cutting that back. Well, this would add more functions, of course, to what we already go forward. And although it's necessary, I'm very wary of what's going on here. One of the things that concerns me is a private provider having to meet the condition of servicing the whole area, 13,000 households or more. That basically cuts out any kind of small local operation, which we know exists at the moment. And part of that, and I'm going to repeat myself again here to, I'm sure, a few groans and moans from around the room here, and that is community service that a small local private provider does provide. And this, to me, is a very, very important factor. And I would hope that the present providers and service area that they take care of would be given very high consideration when we're looking at the options available to us during 2024. Is there, so the question, finally, is there any chance that we can look at a mini hybrid here, for want of a better term, so that we can still provide local companies with the local employment opportunities? Thank you.
Ms. Sarady?
Through to you, Madam Chair, to Director Wilson. In short, I think we've been trying to work on preparing a service that is streamlined across the board. Part of the recommendation to provide service to the whole region would be to make it financially feasible for a contractor to take this on. That's not to say that what you're suggesting can be looked at. The other component that I highlighted is to contract out the glass collection piece as well.
Director McClinton and then Director Segal. Did you had your hand up, didn't you? Yeah.
I was going to move the.
Okay, well, just hang on. Director Segal's got a question.
Yeah, Ms. Saradi, I just wondered if you could speak to the idea of grandfathering and if we're allowed to do that or if we're required to go to RFP for any future contracts.
Through to you, Madam Chair, to Director Segal. That is my understanding, talking to our procurement division, that we are very limited in terms of providing any preferential treatment to any contractor, so would have to be an open and transparent process where any qualified bidder could bid.
Okay, any more questions, Director Wilson?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And this kind of follows on to what the Director Segal has just mentioned about, it's not preferential treatment, but do we not have, and I can't remember the name of the policy here, where it does take into consideration local services, and I'm sure procurement knows that one. We did talk about it before. I can't remember the name of it, where we will give preferential treatment, not preferential treatment, but more consideration to a local company. Can you remember?
Social procurement.
Social procurement. Does that not come into it here?
Ms. Saradi?
Through to you, Madam Chair, to Director Wilson. I can't specifically comment on social procurement. I can say that we had a legal opinion on this topic. And maybe my manager, general manager, or someone else can comment on the social procurement piece.
Thank you. Mr. Postings.
Through the chair to, I can't remember, who asked the question here? Director Wilson, thank you. So that is certainly something that could be part of the procurement process within the RFP. We do outline certain criteria within the RFP, and social procurement is typically one of those aspects that there are points given to organizations that are within, that meet certain criteria within the social procurement policy. I don't off the top of my head know the social procurement policy, but that would be one of the ratings that would be considered for the RFP process there. So.
Yes, please.
That would be great if we can, because I do recall we had a very, very long and detailed discussion when this came up. And it was, yes, this is a good idea. It will probably be more expensive to bring this in, but it's there. I'm pretty certain the policy is there, and we should take that into consideration when we're going forward with this, if we can, please. Thank you.
Director Marmon.
Thank you. I know my community has weighed in on three-stream curbside collection, and you get both sides of the spectrum. Some that can't get it fast enough, and others don't ever bring it here down my driveway. But in the end, the common theme between both of those people is, what is this going to cost me? And that is considerably, for up in area H, North Oyster and Diamond, the main thing about getting this efficient and getting this effective. And so that's what my focus will be on for my community. Thank you.
Director Acton, and then maybe we can move it.
Someone can move it, but I just have
Your
two
question?
questions.
Yeah, no, ask them, please.
Well, I guess one question is around the financial and how come there isn't a comparison of costs based on these two different models when we've mentioned the cost of the trucks. So then what is, and I questioned the interest rate at 5.6 because right now I just got a loan yesterday at 8.6. So things are changing, and so, but to have a better understanding of the financial side when we make this decision, I think would be really pertinent, and I don't see that in this report. And the other thing I don't see in this report is, so I like the idea of a hybrid model for the fact that when things go wrong, someone else can help out. So what's our contingency plan here with the recommendation? And what would the service look like in those snowstorms, in the form of a truck breaking down, in those instances? Because that's when things go really sideways, and it doesn't matter if you've saved the community $300 a year, but that's when things are not great. And also the bear situation is another thing, but it's on the back of my mind. But today, those two things, I think, are not addressed in this report. So it feels like we need that information to make this decision today.
Ms. Sardi, would you like to comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through to you to Director Acton. So the interest rate, our financial manager Tracy can probably comment on it. I understand that we have a different borrowing rate for equipment, and so perhaps you can speak more to that. But I can address.
Sorry, excuse me. It's not just about the interest rate. It's just about the financial piece. We're talking about financials, but we're not able to compare what to what. Like, yeah, $5 million sounds, or $1.5 million sounds like a lot of money, but maybe it's not. Like, I don't know. But I know we're not making the decision on that, on the trucks, but we're talking about finances. So what is the financial cost of fully CVRD to a hybrid model? That's what I don't understand.
And I'm happy to try to answer that question for you. So we can never fully know what the cost of a hybrid service is until we go out to bid. What we do know is what we heard from the other jurisdictions that we have spoken to. I provided you with an example in the staff report of $385 for a comparable service in a different region. There are also a number of other factors that impacts price. So there are a number of other regional districts right now have a lower fee than what we are estimating for 2025 if the service were provided by the CVRD. Something to keep in mind, though, that one of those regional districts right now are really struggling. They got a great deal, but that also speaks to your questions about backup. So part of that great deal, they didn't have the backup equipment. As part of the fully public service, we have planned for a backup truck to address any potential issues. When it comes to the snowstorm, as you know, the CVRD does not maintain roads, so we will provide the service to the degree where possible, whenever it is possible. So I hope that helps answer some of your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Sardi. Any more questions? Director Wilson?
Isn't it amazing how one thing leads to another? And I'm glad you brought this up because there is no comparison. And it's all very well, and I'm sorry to say this, I'm trying to find the right words here without sounding ever so nasty and stuff like that. But I'm sure that in any procurement process, certainly in my experience, you can go and say, look, this is what we want to do. What do you think it's going to cost? And you get a very rough order of magnitude figure back again. It's normal industry practice, rough order of magnitude. So we have some idea of what's going on here. At the moment, we don't have anything like that. It's a question of wait until we go out to a full RFP. No, we can get a ROM figure, I'm sure, and to get these comparisons. And I think it's a good point that Director Acton has brought up. I would like to see some comparisons as well.
Director Morrison.
I'd like to move the staff recommendation, speak to it if I have a seconder.
It's been moved and seconded.
May I proceed?
Yes, please.
So thank you. And, this is one of those very long and challenging discussions that this board and previous boards have had. And I think about, what we can do on balance with the information that we have before us. I've read the staff reports a couple of times. I've gone back and looked at previous material, looked at, a number of issues, been part of the AVICC solid waste initiative. And, that's one thing that when you're first elected here, you don't realize you're going to become a sewer expert, a water expert, and a garbage expert. And, not to say that I'm an expert, but staff put before us what can only be described as fairly exhaustive information. They give us the comparisons that they think are closest. I've looked at the material provided during public input, and it's interesting. I'm hearing, it's almost deja vu, a lot of the same arguments that were put forward when we were struggling with incredible increases from private contractors when our curbside was done privately. 2013, I'm thinking, or maybe even before that, when the decision was made to go to in-house with the totes, everything to, having the right kind of wheels on the totes. And there was a lot of input from the community and a lot of concern from the community, and the service was brought in. We have the new trucks. I don't know whether it was as smooth within staff, but I can tell you the service came in and it was very well received, and didn't hear any of the complaints that were lodged before the service was launched, after the service was implemented. So I've got pretty good faith that staff are going to be able to deliver a top quality service. And that's partly why I've looked at this resolution saying the CVRD should operate it, because I can just remember my one bill, we went from, I think it was $126 with a private contractor to over $170 in 1 year. And it was in an option year of a contract. And we just had to pay it. So we have control over rates. We will set the rates as a board. There's not a lot of flexibility in that, but looking at all of the information that's been provided on balance, and I thank staff for being fairly thorough. I think we need to move forward and trust that our professional staff have given us the best information. And while there has been some new information come to light, I think this is the path forward, and it's going to prove to be efficient and a well-run service, and that we will ultimately have control over. So I'm enthusiastically supporting the resolution. Thank you.
Director Acton and then Director McClinton.
Thank you. I will respectfully disagree with with this resolution and can't support it at this time. Just, the conversation is no longer about whether we want garbage or no garbage. Like, I do believe that conversation has been had, and the majority of the people want garbage service. This conversation here, and not as an expert, but I can guarantee you when the decision's made and things go wrong, it's going to be on our backs, that we were the ones that made the decision. So this is a decision that's going forward for a very long time, and it's a really costly decision. Having a hybrid model, that in how I can picture it working, keeping both sides competitive, keeping and supportive, and I want to understand, what does that look like? What does it look like for all those other points when things go wrong? And I do not believe that I have a clear understanding to make this decision right now that is a CVRD operated service, because I have no facts in here that shows me what happens when you have that versus a hybrid model when things go crazy, or even for costs and how it works. Like best other examples of what the pros and cons are of that decision. So anyway, as said, I won't be supporting this because this decision, when it's wrong, it's going to be the decision of the board. So we're expected to be experts at this point, but.
Director McClinton.
Thank you, Chair. I will be supporting this motion enthusiastically. I have a few comments that I'd like to make, and I'd like them to be considered through the lens of the fact that I am a small business owner. I like to think I'm an entrepreneur. I've got 20 employees, roughly, and I've been building my business for 10 years. And as often as possible, I like to keep things in the private sector. I think it's more efficient. But this, in some cases, but as an elected official, I believe I have a fiduciary responsibility to my area, to the rest of the citizens that live in the CVRD, and maybe even as a citizen of the planet. Currently, we've got some areas that there's no garbage collection, but the garbage we get, we take it to a transfer station, we put it in trucks, we put it onto the ferry, we ship it down to the Badlands somewhere in Washington, and out of sight, out of mind. The organics make up 40% of our landfill. We need to get those out of there as quickly as possible. There's a clear mandate, strategically to consider greenhouse gas emissions. Methane is 25 times more potent. Doesn't last as long, for sure, but it's 25 times more potent than CO2. And I think it's our responsibility to consider this service and to do what's right for everybody in the CVRD. Anecdotally, I can say, since moving back to Area G, where I grew up, it's been about 4 years, the only time my garbage hasn't been picked up is when I forgot to put it out. Every single time it's been picked up for 4 years, so I know that's not the case in every place, but the CVRD does a good job, and this comes down to like the core function of what local government is. Clean water, fire, land use, garbage. This is like why regional districts were formed in the 60s, and I just think we're kind of pushing this to the side, this whole issue about garbage, and I think it's our responsibility to take a leadership position on this, and so I'll be supporting a fully public model moving forward. Thank you.
Director Segal.
Thank you. Yeah, I find this incredibly challenging, being from Area A, which has had incredible service from pan disposal. Snow, broken down trucks, it doesn't matter. They were able to come through. And I had a different experience from Director McClinton. My recycling this past summer wasn't picked up a number of times, but that was an anomaly over the 8 years that I've lived here. I feel like this is a regional service growing pain, and in the South we have this specific situation. I would love if there was this perfect little hybrid model that just was carved out for areas A, B, and C. But with the way things work, I can really see that is not really going to pan out the way we want. Even if we do carve it out, it has to go out to RFP, et cetera. And so I understand the regional nature of needing to divert organics, as Director McClinton stated. I don't want to ship as much garbage as we do now to Washington. And I do want to see it be made as efficient as possible, which is best for all in our tax dollars. But yeah, I also feel like we have this kind of our own South End problem of, when it snows, we're going to be really far away from where the trucks are and how that'll impact our service. So I really struggle with this decision. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Director Segal. So this is a pretty important decision, and I'm wondering what the people who haven't said anything are thinking. Would you like to say something, Director Abbott?
Yeah, I'd like to contribute. I believe in the economies of scale, and am most impressed with the CVRD service that I've received thus far. I, in fact, order extra large recycling containers and garbage cans, and we have a severe rodent issue, so any notion of composting on our property just turns into feeding rats. I want to see the green organic stream, and I basically have to echo what Director McClinton said.
Thank you. I don't know if Director Deck is with us. Oh, yeah, she is. There she is. Director Deck.
Can you hear me? Nope.
Yes, we can.
Oh, you can. Oh, good. Good. Yes, I apologize for coming in and out. Um, we're experiencing some illness these days in our house, so but I've been listening attentively, and I strongly believe, and I agree with Director McClinton, that it's so important to get those organics out of the waste stream and to save costs from shipping. So I think we have the largest tipping fees of any regional district. That's my understanding. So this would certainly help, and so I will be supporting this for sure.
Thank you, Director Deck. Director Martin's okay? Everyone needs to understand that this is actually a weighted vote. So I'm going to turn to the corporate secretary to explain that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just reading the legislation with regards to it, and it doesn't discern between committee and board, but just give me a moment before you call the question.
I'll just tell you what I think then, while you ponder the the weightiness of this decision. I think I agree very strongly that we need to move forward, and I think it's a very challenging decision because of the hybrid model when you've got union commitments and you can't kind of step back and rejig how you might do a hybrid model that makes a sense of from an efficiency and cost point of view. Your hands are tied, I think. So I think this is the only way to move forward.
Madam Chair?
That is not a new fact. We were told that the point that we can only do a hybrid model with organics is because we have union staff that already do the regular stuff. So we are tied into that model. We could do hybrid for just the organics, but that really doesn't make sense to have trucks crossing paths all the time from an efficiency point of view. Does that make sense? And it's also about the trucks that can pick up two things versus the trucks that pick up one thing, and needing to make a decision on getting some trucks. Director Wilson, correct me if I'm wrong.
No. I'm actually going to, while Patrick's looking that up, my understanding was weighted votes were only at board level, not at committee level. This is a one-for-one vote here.
Well, let's let the corporate secretary do his job.
Well, I'm sure.
That's a good. All right, I'm going to turn to the corporate secretary for the grand answer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is our advice to the chair, and subject to the chair ruling or a challenge of the ruling. One director, one vote here at the committee. When it hits the board table, it is electoral area service directors only, and it would be a weighted vote.
All right. Is that okay with everyone? Director Acton? Because it's not establishing a service, it's a...
If I may, Madam Chair, yes. You're talking about the administration and the operation of the service, not establishing the service. That being said, if you advance this and you get to a point where you're actually establishing the service, that's done through bylaw, then your board would be weighing in on that, and the establishment of the service through the bylaw.
But the most
We're not at
important,
that stage yet.
right, but the most important thing today is that it is not a weighted vote, so we can just carry on as we normally do. Director Acton, do you wanted to add something?
Well, I just wanted to be clear. I don't see this as a vote for garbage or no garbage. The community of Area B, the majority want garbage, and they do believe that we should divert our compost and reduce our waste. That's not what this is about, but this is, to me, is about not having the information. We're being asked whether we should have a hybrid or not hybrid, and I do not understand the pros and cons of each when it comes down to when the community notices the services is down, when there's a snowstorm, and how would they support each other? And I think even if it was slightly more expensive, and we don't have a cost analysis, if it was slightly more expensive, the community would pay for better service, especially in those instances. So that's where I'm at today.
So just to summarize, I agree, we're voting on how we deliver this three-stream garbage collection, whether it's a hybrid or not a hybrid. The motion on the floor is to go with an in-house CVRD delivered service. And I hear from you that you do not have enough information about the hybrid version from a financial perspective to feel comfortable going down the road about the in-service. So I guess I'm going to turn to the corporate secretary and say, if we wanted to refer this back to staff for more information, we would have to defeat the current motion and make a referral motion. Is that correct? Or just do a referral motion?
Madam Chair, your option is to defer this decision pending whether it's more information from staff. So the motion can sit on the table in such time as staff come back, or as you pointed out, you can certainly defeat that motion and then bring up another motion and instruct staff to do something that would assist you in making a final decision on how you'd like to provide the service.
Okay, so Director Atkin could make a deferral motion at this point if she would like to ask staff for more information, recognizing that that may have cost implications on the purchasing of trucks, as was laid out in the report.
I move to defer it.
And do I have a second?
If we had the information by the board meeting, then.
Okay, and I have a seconder, and I'm Mr. Robbins.
Just for clarity for the minutes, the motion is being deferred pending additional information from staff on financial information, if we can get some clarity so that we have some instruction and we know what we're deferring and we know what we're bringing back to the committee.
You would like financial information on the hybrid model versus the in-house model, is that correct? Additional information.
And how these two types of services would work in a emergency situation or a snowstorm which sometimes happens week after week. So
Right.
When the service is down, okay, that would be a good term then. When the
Okay.
service is down, and how that would complement the service or not complement it, or how it would work. How it
Miss-
would work.
All right, Ms. Sarady's got her hand up, so maybe she would like some clarification.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to point out that the staff report does point to some information about backup. In terms of service during snowstorms, we would be limited. I think what we're finding in other jurisdictions as well, including our neighboring jurisdiction, North Cowichan, they found that during snowstorms, it depends on who the service provider is, in their experience, the private contractor have had issues to provide a service. So I just want to point that out. In terms of cost, again, I do want to point out that we can go, the only way for staff to find out what the true cost would be for hybrid service would be to do a request for information or a request for proposal. Just want to point that out.
Thank you. Any more discussion, comment? Director Morrison and then Director Wilson.
Thank you. And to the propriety of referring this, I've read this report multiple times, and I'm wondering what additional information, because I got, what I gleaned from the reports is that they've given us as best information that can be obtained practicably already. It's contained in the reports. It's, as staff have just said, that it's, to get further, more accurate numbers requires an actual decision to go to RFP. I don't think that this tough decision should be deferred, referred. I think we should defeat this motion and vote on the main motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Wilson?
I'm just seeking clarification from Patrick, if I can, please, about the weighted vote. And I know it's slightly off the subject here, but in this particular case, I think you said that the vote is one-on-one here, but when it goes to the board, it will be electoral areas only voting, but that would be a weighted vote? Okay, it seems a bit weird, but thank you.
All right, any more discussion? Director McClinton.
Yeah, I just want to echo Director Morrison's comments. We need to make a decision on this to get these trucks bought. So, yeah, I think we need to defeat this motion to refer and vote on the main motion.
Okay, I'm going to call a question. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Director Morrison, there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 people opposed.
Can I have the show of hands again? Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Correct.
Question on the main motion?
Any more discussion on the main motion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Anyone opposed? 1, 2, 3 opposed. Motion's carried. So that will be that will go to the board next week. We're on to some policy things now, and it would be really nice if people participated in the conversation. We tried to get to consensus on them because they're policies, right?
Great, we are on R6. Report from the Strategic Initiatives Division, CVRD bylaw number 4424, Development Permit Area Amendment bylaw 2023.
Welcome, Mr. Garnett.
Thank you. Just waiting for the presentation to load. Excellent. Thanks, Chase. So this report is for bylaw amendment number 4424. It's largely a development permit area amendment bylaw, and it's to the harmonized official community plan. So this, the OCP bylaw 4270, of course, was adopted in October 2021. It has 18 schedules total. 15 of them are map schedules. So this report and the bylaw amendment addresses 5 of the schedules that are listed on this screen. So we're looking at the Schedule A, the main policy document, Schedule B, the local area plans. There's very minor amendments to those 2 schedules. The bulk of the amendments are to Schedule C, development permit area. Small amendment as well, replacement amendments to Schedule D, agricultural land maps, and Schedule U, development permit area maps. And I'll do my best to explain them to you. So the purpose of this bylaw amendment is to improve implementation of the harmonized development permit areas, also to take it to the next level of modernizing the development permit areas. And then the reason that we're proposing amendments to Schedule A and B is really just to align the various components of the OCP schedules. So a bit of a timeline of, because this is not the first time that this bylaw has been before this committee. There was a first reading of an earlier version of this bylaw in May 2022. Subsequently, we referred to the ALC and school districts, and we did hear back from the ALC, and some of their comments are some of the reasons why we've amending the bylaw. We also received some agricultural policy analysis, which was previously presented to this committee. There's also been further map refinement, significant amount of work from the GIS division. So now we're here, June 2023 at ESC, and we're hoping that in June there will be a consideration of new first reading of this bylaw. So again, the harmonized OCP, 44 development permit areas from the former OCPs were brought into 13 development permit areas in the harmonized OCP. And so they're in these sort of broad categories. And I just sort of bring these on the slide because I'm hoping that it'll kind of provide some context to the various amendments that are being proposed. So generally, the proposed changes since the first reading was given in May 2022 are in response to the ALC referral comments, the agricultural policy analysis, and then the modernization. There was significant amount of updated data from the Agricultural Land Commission as well as other data sets that sort of form the basis of the development permit area mapping. So I'll just give an overview. So for example, Schedule C, overview of changes. So this is to the development permit area guidelines and exemptions. So for development permit area 2, sensitive ecosystems, there are existing exemptions that apply only to area D, and we're looking to expand those. And this is a step of modernization, expand those to all of their electoral areas. We're also proposing to add a new exemption that would allow for a qualified environmental professional to provide field verification on a site or a review of orthophotography to confirm that there's no sensitive ecosystems on the site, rather than relying purely on the high-level mapping that exists in the development permit area guidelines. For DPA 4 aquifer protection, we're proposing to add an exemption for normal farm practices similar to the language that is being proposed in DPA 1, so to exempt normal farm practices from this aquifer protection development permit area, the exception being for buildings that contain livestock, and as long as they're done in accordance with the provincial regulations that govern agricultural practices. Further proposed changes for DPA 8, farmland protection, this bylaw amendment would include Area H in the scope of that development permit area. Also clarification that this development permit area applies only to the agricultural land. So there's some sort of confusion in the guidelines now about whether or not this farmland protection guideline applies to the agricultural land or to the land adjacent to the agriculture. So we're trying to clean that up so it's applying only to the non-agricultural lands. And another sort of consistency of exemptions, adding an exemption for works undertaken by the CVRD and other emergency works. That would be applied to more broadly to DPAs 2 through 6 and 8. In terms of the mapping changes for all DPAs, the GIS division has been busy updating the color coding so that when the development permit areas are layered on top of each other, there's improved visibility. And again, updated data of the ALR mapping, and that's applicable to the DPA 8 farmland protection and Schedule D, which is the agricultural lands maps. So it's not practical to cover all of the proposed changes. It's an extensive amount, but there's a complete list of each change and the rationale provided in two tables which form attachments to the staff report. And the next steps would be referrals following a new first reading, if that's given by the board, a consideration of second reading, a public hearing, and then consideration of third reading and adoption if all goes according to plan. The recommendation is before you in sort of a more simplified version. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garnett. Do I have any questions? Director Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ali. Could you, on DPA 4, and I see it's mentioned in the report as well, that it's normal farm practices which are regulated by the province, without looking that document up, can you summarise what normal farm practices would be? For instance, we know that there are things that go on sometimes, and we have had some examples of not normal stuff going on that's come to this board, how would that be regulated, or how would that be policed?
Through the chair, in order to give you an accurate answer, I would need to look it up. I don't have that off the top of my head, yeah.
Director Abbott.
Thanks, Chair. Ms. Garnett, good report. We had a session this morning on public hearings. How would the public hearing look? Is it one public hearing for all 9 areas? That's why it's harmonized, so.
Yes, that's what I would be proposing, yeah.
Okay, and where would, I guess it would be virtual, most likely.
Yes.
At present, unless we can get Ms. Cherolf to allow us to do hybrids.
Director Martman. Then Director Atten after.
Thank you. Yeah, so I read this through a couple of times because I found it a little hard to follow sometimes because there's a lot, I think as one comment in there, a lot of technical changes. So, but the piece that keeps popping out to me, and I need some clarification on it, is around the normal farm practices. Because after that, it says excluding confined barns or shelters for livestock. Can you explain why that piece is there? Thank you.
Thank you. And we have informally referred these proposed changes to the Agricultural Land Commission and the Ministry of Agriculture, and we've consulted with our agricultural policy expert on that. So this is language that's sort of been drafted to sort of provide an exemption for agricultural activity, so they don't need to come forward to get a development permit as long as they're following the provincial regulations that they are already supposed to be following, right? The Code of Practice of Environment and the Right to Farm regulations. But with the exception of buildings containing livestock because of the risk to aquifers and riparian areas associated with livestock. That is the core of the exemption.
So if you read I'm sure you have read the Code of Practice for Agricultural Management, they define it even narrower. So if you have less than 10 animals in a confined building that you feed, then you have a setback of 5 meters. If you have more than 10 animals that you feed in a confined building, it's 30 meters. But if you don't feed your animals in these buildings, it's a 5 meter. So you're taking, from my perspective, it's a barrier to a farmer. You're adding an added barrier to what they're doing by including that statement of a confined building or shelter. Because it's already in the Code of Practice, but you're saying, no, we're disregarding the Code of Practice, we're going to add an added layer of, at least that's how I'm seeing it. Maybe you can correct me if I'm not seeing it through your lens.
Yeah, so I think what we're trying to accomplish is to ensure that farmers are not unduly triggered by development permit area requirements, and that's why the exemption exists, but trying to mitigate those farming activities that have the perceived greatest risk to the resources or natural assets that we're trying to protect, being it aquifers or riparian areas. I will say that through our referral to the ALC, the Ministry of Agriculture, we can take a closer look at making sure that that language is as accurate as possible and making sure we're not, confusing things with respect to the various setbacks you just recommended in the Code of Practice. That's certainly something that we can do. We will be referring this as it goes forward, so.
One more if I can.
Yes, please.
And thank you, that's very appreciated. And I'm just one farmer, there's others too that, certainly there's groups that would be maybe able to weigh in and give you feedback besides the ALC, but it just seems it's one of these themes that seem to be reoccurring, and I think you've heard this as well, is that, if it's already spelled out, do we need to be doing it again?
Right.
And so you've heard it, and thank you for that, appreciate it. I have another one, but I'll follow up after.
Director Acton.
Well, some of my questions, I think, are coming to light. I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation, because, yes, this was a tough report to follow along. My brain does not work this way, so even just those brief slides were really helpful.
I generally have I have a couple of questions, but I too have found this very complicated. The riparian regulations don't, I think it's, people don't understand where, when and where, from an agricultural perspective, when they apply and when they don't apply. And maybe you could comment on that and explain it to me.
I will try my best, and the staff report does deal with this kind of complicated issue of whether or not agricultural activities should trigger the riparian areas regulation. And so historically in the CVRD, we've always not applied the riparian protection DPA in whatever form it's been to agricultural activities. So there was the exemption for normal farm practices, in that exemption exists. Last May, we had proposed to remove that, and so that farm practices would require a development permit and would have to come through the process. The ALC, that proposal was based on the fact that local governments do have the authority to ask for or require development permits for agricultural activities, and there is some, confusion, I would say, over that. However, the ALC has asked us not to remove the exemption. Please, they said, keep the exemption. And so we've sort of added this qualifying language around compliance with provincial regulations that do govern agricultural activities. We also feel that removing that exemption for farm practices would be a significant change for the agricultural community. And also just the implementation of development permits through the CVRD. It would involve bylaw enforcement, right? It would involve communication and all of that kind of piece around what exactly constitutes an agricultural activity and engaging with farmers to let them know that the CVRD wants to play a role in their agricultural activities. So as it stands now, we're proposing to maintain an exemption for normal farm practices in the riparian protection development permit area, as long as they are following those provincial regulations that speak to farm practices.
Okay. That's, my other issue is about shade for hot. There's a piece in there is about land clearing and I think that it has to be in a hazard. It's still, the tree thing has to be in a hazard area in order to keep the trees. But I think we need to be really trying to we really need to try and keep tree cover for shade issues in the hotter temperatures. So I guess we just cannot address that properly in our existing way we're set out right now.
I'm not sure that I fully understand the question. We're not proposing any changes related to guidelines that speak to removal of trees. So our existing development permit powers would still be applying. Is there a specific part of the?
Well, it's fine. I know that we just have our hands are tied on that one.
Okay.
Anything else, anyone? Director Martman.
Thank you. So I'm trying to put this in a perspective, maybe just a couple sentences first. And that is when the ALC responded as referral, they came back talking about agricultural land in the ALR, correct? So the question that comes up often now in farming communities is about, what about the farm that's not on agricultural land? I'm not surprising you with this. So the question is, what about lands that are, the farmers that are actually farming, have farm status? Do they, or should they be considered in the exemptions that are applied to ALR land? Thank you.
Thank you. That is a good question. And I do want to thank you all for this. I realize this is quite a complicated matter, and that's why it's been taking a while to bring back forward to you. That is a good question. One of the things that we struggle with is that the regulations around that are provided in the code of practice, that the relationship with ALR, but I will think on that and get back to you on that.
Curious, and maybe somebody at the board table or Ali, maybe you know, how does land get into the ALR? Could they apply? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, the Agricultural Land Commission was created in 1974, I believe, and that's when the broad provincial mapping was applied. There is a process to sort of add or remove land from the ALR, but it doesn't happen very often, especially the exclusion is discouraged strongly. So, yeah.
So, do we have a motion on, can someone move the recommendation? Would someone like to? It's been moved and seconded. And so this is just starting the process. This is not a final decision. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. We're moving on to R7, Report from the Strategic Initiatives Division, Community Benefits Policy for Electoral Areas 2023.
Thank you. You're back again. Great.
I'm back again, thank you. And I'm just going to pull up the presentation. How's that? All right. So thank you. This is a report on community benefits policy for the electoral areas. So what are community benefits or amenities? Well, they are negotiated and acquired to address growth-related infrastructure impacts associated with development approved through the board's power over zoning. So applicants provide amenities as a way of ensuring that the proposed development is making a balanced contribution to the community at large. And the amenities are offered to assist with growth pressures and meeting the needs of a growing community, and so that the existing property owners are not fully subsidizing any improvements. The current practice is for planning staff to discuss community benefits associated with rezoning applications on an application-by-application basis. A community benefits policy would establish a unified and transparent approach to benefits negotiations in the electoral areas. An earlier draft policy was tabled for information in 2021, and now we're bringing forward a revised policy and options. And really, again, the second point on this slide is that a policy would help capture appropriate benefits through rezoning applications. So the changes from the version that was presented in 2021, the scope of the policy has broadened to include commercial and industrial forms of development in those rezoning applications. And the policy would also apply to residential development applications of 4 or more units or lots. A list of potential amenities have been added, but at a high level so as not to be overly prescriptive. Negotiation principles have been added and implementation steps to provide clarity from both staff, the board, advisory planning commissions, developers. So the staff report discusses the benefits and drawbacks of 3 options. The first option is the recommended option, and it is a community benefits policy based on a land lift approach. The second is a community benefits policy based on a target rate approach, and the third is to not adopt a policy and just continue with a status quo. And I'll do my best to explain these different options. So land lift is the increase in value of the land from one density to another or one use to another attributed to the approved rezoning. So this type of policy would require a project-by-project site analysis to determine the contribution of the benefit that's desired and that the development can financially support. So the benefit is we'd have a policy that quantifies the value based on lift, and we'd have a formalized process with, again, those key features: implementation, guidance, negotiation principles, a list of potential amenities. The drawbacks of this approach are the land lift assessment evaluation in a changing marketplace in a large region, and the contribution amounts are not known in advance by the developers. The second option is the target rate. So this is when the policy itself would have set rates within it based on the use or number of units. This is considered by some sort of best practices documents to be the least disruptive to development approvals, as the costs are known in advance by the developers. The major drawback here is that this requires advanced financial analysis. So we would have to have financial analysis of this region to understand what those target rates would be. We have probably varied market conditions throughout the region, and it would require review of those target rates approximately every 5 years. We don't have that. And then the third option, again, is the sort of status quo, don't adopt a policy. Currently, we're not always quantifying the contribution value in rezoning applications, so there's potential lost opportunity to capture CACs. But I will say, in the staff report, we refer to the changing provincial context, right? So the pending legislative changes or directives coming in the fall, which might change local government's powers with respect to negotiating CACs. So this is sort of an evolving context. So there is some uncertainty with that. But that being said, we do recommend option one because it does provide that clarity around implementation, the list of benefits, and those other features that we talked about. So the recommendation is to adopt option one land lift policy. It's the best option in light of the information that we have without the financial analysis, and it can be amended when and if the provincial direction changes. So the recommendation is to adopt option one.
Thank you, and that's just a policy, so it would, as soon as it's adopted at the board, it would take effect?
Correct.
So, and my opinion so far is that we carry on with this amenity stuff in a very ad hoc way, and that we would be wise to make it fairer and more transparent moving forward in a more structured kind of an approach. So I appreciate you bringing this forward. I have Director Morrison first, Director Acton, and then Director Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, when I read a number of times, I kind of lost for words here. I'm trying to look at this from the perspective that's relatable to directors and how we would use this policy. And I'll tell you, when I read through it, my initial first blush was, well, of course, the target base makes the most sense. And I was actually really surprised when I got to the end and saw the recommended resolution being the lift method. You know, I just see all sorts of challenges with the lift method, you know, people having an analysis done, locking in what you think the number is going to be, something that doesn't get developed for a number of years. I didn't have enough information to have any confidence in that recommendation. I just think that it's fraught with us getting locked into, similar to the cash for density thing, where people are making $500,000 lots for $10,000. So another thing that is, and I understand that we got great staff and they write incredibly precise and technical reports, but we're the end users of this, and I think we got to know what this policy is meaning on the ground when people approach us. And this is a very prescriptive approach to this, and I don't know if lawyers have had a crack at it or not, but it's not feeling very usable to me. So I'm going to suggest that I can't support the land lift method. The target base seemed to make a whole bunch of sense to me. And sadly, I'm gonna ask that I wish we had an analysis done of what we have been doing over the last number of years, because it's been very clear that the cash for density approach that was used in certain areas really didn't work and wasn't fair. And yet I looked to Director Nicholson's area where there were developments where they, you know, I don't know how many lots that were developed, but the fire department got a lot. And you know, the Parks Department got a lot, and those appreciated in value as the development built it, and there was a real bonus to the community to be able to have a good chunk of change. And I don't see the analysis in this report that would either support or detract from keeping that kind of, so I think there's more to be done on this. I can't support the land lift. I think that it locks us into what may be an inferior path forward. And you know, when it comes to resources, I'm hoping that the staff recommendation not to recommend the target-based wasn't based on the fact that we don't have current resources in the budget to fund it, to do that research. Because if it's the best method, but it's lacking funding, we need to know that this may be the best method and we have to resource it. So I'm just not there yet in being able to, you know, full-throated endorsement of a resolution here today, even the staff recommended one. I'd like the ability to consider this, and I'd also like a little bit of analysis on the pros and cons of what we've been doing, because I think Chair Nicholson may have a point that if we've got legislation coming down the pipe in a few months, that maybe we can muddle along for a little longer and wait until, you know, something's imposed on us by the province. Thanks.
Director Acton.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with many of those comments, and some of them I don't know that I have an opinion on, but I agree that it's somehow, or the bigger picture is not here, and I can actually say that, you know, thank you for bringing this forward. I remember asking Ross Blackwell, can't we have something like this? And so it's here, that's great. But, you know, for example, or what makes me think we really do need this. There are some applications that do really well in the amenities, and then there's others who have nothing. Like, and just because it's for whatever reason. And that's not best for the community either. And I can say, for example, in West Vancouver, the land lift is 80%. So if the zoning increased it by whatever, 4 times, you're paying 80% of the value of that increase to the city. So that is really, it leaves that 20% for the developers. So it is a math thing for sure. And I think it's really important that we get this right. And because even when I was reading, I was thinking, oh, well, how would this work for the application we just saw today? So I think we should have more conversations around this, either by a consultant or just like casual staff, and like, let's really discuss this, because I think it's really important, and it's also important to get it right. And all of those comments are fair, and there's more to consider. So again, thank you, but I hope we can continue this conversation, and I would look to our corporate secretary how we could do that and move this to even a more casual discussion of educating ourselves and really understanding the pros and cons and the costs and all these things.
Thank you, Director Acton. I have Director Wilson and then Director Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, keep it short. Thank you, Ali. Basically what they said. And it seems to me that the target rate policy the target rate approach to me is a better one as well. It gives, the main thing about it here, the benefit of target rate approach is that once the development community understands target rates and incorporates rates into the cost of development, housing prices are not negatively impacted. That to me is a key factor right there. And mainly the development community needs to know what's it going to cost me. And I think the target rate approach does that. So I would prefer to see option 2 as well. Thank you.
Director Martman.
Thank you for the report, and I'm not sure I'm aligned with others on this, because I really read this and came out with, I write down on my thing whether should I go forward or not, and I have a question mark, because I think it's really hard to determine. And I think the factors that I wrote down were what's best for the community and speed to development are sort of the 2 balancing things I look at. And So to back up one little bit, though, I come from an area where the assumption, we would challenge this assumption. The assumption under this is that development is what you want. And up in my area, you don't see many developments coming forward. There's not a lot of community amenities coming forward. And I think the community is quite happy with that. So, you know, I think there's that perspective as well within the CVRD that needs to be looked at. I think the challenge that when I read the report, the challenge isn't, you know, there's a target or there's a lift approach. But I think the challenge is how are we going to be best set up for future changes this year, perhaps. And I think that that's what staff is really, that's where they've landed on the lift approach, is that will best set us up. You can move forward with that policy right away. I think the targeted approach is going to take more time and more effort and perhaps not fit into a model that's coming down the pipe. So I guess where I would land on this is that I'd like more information. I'd like to really understand the targeted approach to, you know, what is required of it. What are the cons around, you know, do you do this every 5 years and then all of a sudden you find next year you have a big bubble in the real estate market and you find your targets aren't even appropriate or close. Or maybe the other way, they're just so big that they put off development. So I think there's some pieces there gathering more information, but I think we shouldn't lose the sight that we have to stay nimble and flexible, and that's part of what I think the report's saying.
Thank you. If I could add just one thing to your first point, this policy is not suggesting that development is approved because amenities are offered. So just to be clear on that, it's not saying that development that we want, that we're assuming growth. We still need to come back to the official community plan. Where do we want to see growth happen? When we are seeing growth happen in areas we want to see it, can we capture some of that, that additional value that's being created? So I just wanted to clarify that point.
Director Abbott?
I, like others, feel targeted would be ideal. However, in light of the time and energy to get to targeted, I'd like to see the land lift option proceed, because you did say this can be amended at a future date, but you've also included industrial and commercial properties, making it a bit more equitable. So that's how I feel.
Thank you. I think I feel the same way. But I'm wondering, would it be possible to do an exercise where you chose a couple of different kinds of properties and you know, did a calculation on the two different methods? Not you know, setting your own target. You don't have to do the whole target setting process, but just as for illustration purposes.
Yeah, that would be an interesting challenge. I mean, the financial analysis that's done for municipalities and to assist them in setting targeted rates, it's done by, you know, people who with more advanced knowledge about land economics than me. We could take a look at it, and if that is the direction of the committee, yeah, we could come back with more information if that's what you like.
Well, I'm just wondering, one option is we could approve the policy now, but continue to look at whether we should actually adapt it or modify it in the future, or we could put off approving it today and go down a different road after we spent some more time discussion. So I just turned to the committee. Director Atkin.
I would feel more comfortable having a bit more conversations before we take on a new policy. We've never seen things get reversed quickly if it was a bad decision. And are we, I guess we're in a little bit of a rush, but not a huge rush. Maybe we'll have more information on what to expect from the province. So I personally, I would like to refer this back to staff for just a little bit more comparison information, kind of like paint a picture for us of what each looks like and how it might apply to developments that have happened, where we're missing and where we would not do as well. Or
Let's hear from Director Segal, because we haven't heard from her yet.
Yeah, I would second that. I'd like to see it in a workshop format. Yeah, to get an idea, also, we see so many situations where a rezoning happens, but the amenity doesn't get paid out for years and years, and then it's renegotiated, so just an understanding of how that would work, and also how private school rezonings, how that plays in when we lose tax revenue, and how that applies to amenity contributions. So yeah, I'd like to see it in a workshop discussion format if possible.
Director Deck, do you have any thoughts on this topic?
I agree with those who need more information. I certainly don't understand completely. So the workshop appeals to me as well, but even, I don't want to impose a lot of work on staff who are already busy. So if there's an easier, faster way to do it, I would appreciate that too.
So how does the workshop sound to you, Ms. Garnett?
The work. Yeah, so as I said, we would need expertise in this area to sort of facilitate this. So I guess it also comes back to, direction from the committee on how to spend our, direct our resources, our time. Yeah.
So then I have a question. If you would need help putting on a workshop, is that going to be a learning opportunity for staff who would have to implement whatever it is that's settled on?
I would see that as a benefit.
Is that a benefit to that? So maybe it would be money well spent. People who are more anxious to get going on this, can you live with putting it off for a little while and doing a workshop? Do we have consensus, Director Martman?
I would appreciate the workshop, but I also don't want to lose sight of the purpose of this report coming forward now. And that is to give some direction to staff to be able to do, the negotiations that take place, and to set them up and put them into place so that when changes come from the province, that they're set up to be able to prepare to have some flexibility. I don't think they're opposed to each other to do both. I think option one does say it's an interim policy. The idea to gather more information. I don't want to go down the route of not having staff in a position of going like, well, now we have to come to us right away because we don't have something in place to work from. So I think option one does give us that, plus the workshop.
Plus the workshop. And Director Morrison, did you want to add to this?
Well, I do, and thanks to staff for putting in our local resource in the city of Nanaimo for the target-based system, because I just up and went and called one of them. And they're rocking and rolling, they love it. As soon as the community got, aware and comfortable with the system, they all know what's expected, and they're moving ahead with it. So this is all, I'm really reluctant to implement a policy that may be, I don't want to say tossed out, but overruled by the province in 6 months from now. And I think we far better off making a decision based on good information and what will work best for us. So I'd support the workshop. I wouldn't support making a decision on this right now.
Director Act.
Thank you, I agree. No offense to you guys, but, we have a proposal or the idea of that staff may not be able to do it. I think if we just step back for a second, let staff go talk. They can come back in 2 weeks and say, we can't, we still stand behind this recommendation, or yes, we can deliver, or we've found out more information from the province, and then we have someone who just made a phone call and now there's new information. So I think it would be really important for us not to rush, and any decision that has been rushed never turns out well for us. So I think a couple weeks or a month or 2 months is not going to do any, I can't see any big implications on it. And staff can go off and talk about our decisions, which I'm sure will come up, and it can come back to us in 2 weeks, or even at the board as a strong,
Director Martman.
very strong recommendation.
Director Martman.
So, I feel like we're sort of debating, which I guess is what we're supposed to do. Maybe staff could just comment on the last paragraph under summary, because that's what catches my eye in terms of what I think the message in this report is really trying to say to us. So, do you want me to read it, or you?
I have it here.
Okay.
The CVRD does not currently have a DCC bylaw. Did you say the very last sentence?
No, last paragraph.
Last paragraph. The CVRD does not currently have a DCC bylaw to recover infrastructure costs, and the timing for adopting the modernized zoning bylaw, which can establish density bonus zones, is unknown. There's potential for major development applications to come forward where CAC negotiations are not captured in the absence of a policy. And can I just add, I was just been thinking about this workshop and the timing and the reality of reporting back in 2 weeks, which is not likely, quite frankly. Right, okay, yes, we can report back to some extent, but in terms of planning a workshop, I'm just thinking bigger about if we're waiting for provincial changes in the fall, does it make sense to convene a workshop on amenities, using up all of your time, if we're not uncertain about that. So I just throw that out there.
I am not, well, when do we expect to hear from the province, and will it apply to electoral areas or just to munis? I guess are the two questions I would have. Because I would hate to put this off and then find that they're not even thinking about us.
Right, so it is anticipated that it would be in the fall. There's nothing to say there would be a difference in this respect with related to the CACs, that it would be different for a municipal versus electoral area context. That being said, we don't know, maybe it'll be 2 years before anything comes down. So this comes back to the point of recommending option 1 for the time being, because it would serve as a policy while we await changes at the provincial level, and whether or not the direction is to proceed with a workshop to further everyone's understanding of how these negotiations take place. That's also very, very much possible.
Well, that's definitely my preference, is to get on with it and have a workshop and learn more about it, and switch over to target if it makes more sense after we understand more. But that's my opinion.
Are we ready for a motion?
Yes, if someone would make one.
I would move staff's recommendation that we continue with the land lift, with adding the other, the commercial and industrial, pursue a workshop, and if amendments are needed, forthcoming along those lines.
Do I have a seconder? I have a seconder. Director Acton?
Well, so if we're moving ahead with the land lift, I don't want to kill this, not like my vote's going to kill it, but I wouldn't want this to be defeated and we would be status quo for good. But we still don't have a clear, how would it work from here? Would you come back with suggested percentages, and what would be the next steps?
Good question.
Yeah, there are a number of options. I mean, we could talk to land economists to find out what it would cost to facilitate a workshop, to conduct the financial analysis that's required. We could come back with more information, certainly. I'm also, a lot of the districts or the local governments that have set target rates are municipalities. So that would be another thing to look at, is how many electoral areas have policies, because we're a very large region, right? So that the economics, the market realities of throughout are going to be very different here. So we can certainly come back with more options if that is the direction.
After today, what would happen? What would come back?
We could come back with another staff report.
No, so the motion that's on the floor is that we would pass this policy and have a workshop to learn more about alternatives or how the lift thing actually works, right? Because you have to set some percentages on the lift thing, do you not?
Target rates, yeah, so
Yeah.
it would be $1,000 per residential unit or something like that.
Well, so there needs to be more discussion and understanding about it, but in general, if we approve this, in general, we would like to get going on a policy, and this is the one we'll take in an interim way until we understand more about it. And so could we expect a workshop in the September to do that?
Yeah.
Is that possible? No pressure.
Just a comment, if I may.
Oh, yeah, please.
Just to be mindful of how this lands, like with the development community, is if you're feeling cautious about this, or if you're proposing to look at another model, just take it into consideration. Like we don't know if there's provincial changes that are going to be implemented. I think Ali was quite clear about that. So I think you need to feel comfortable with the path that you're taking now for a period of time, because we wouldn't want to make an amendment in short order that would then change, I guess, the process for the development community, because that would be maybe not received very well. Just a comment.
So do you mean if the province steps in with something different? Or if we moved from a lift to a target model after we decided that it would be better to do that? But presumably to do a target model, you would have to do some research and it would take time. So potentially we won't have anything for 6 months if we don't adopt this lift thing, basically, is what I'm coming to the conclusion.
Yes.
And I don't think that's acceptable anymore. I think that we've been too wishy-washy for too long, personally. Ms. Cheryl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to highlight that if the committee does advance the policy, and that and if it is adopted by the board next week, there is a process that needs to be undertaken to operationalize the policy, which will involve updating our application forms and also our procedures, and it may also require an amendment to the procedures bylaw. Given the obligation on the applicants to provide certain information, and so that will take some time to operationalize. I just wanted to provide that information to you.
So does that mean that if we had a workshop and decided that we were foolish to approve the lift thing, that we could pull back even before you'd implemented the lift?
So, Madam Chair, I mean, policy of the board is something that can be amended or rescinded at any time. Once it has been adopted by the board, there is an obligation on staff to implement it and to try to do that expediently. But I am just wanting to advise that that won't happen overnight, that there will be a process that we need to go through to update things and to understand what it is that people need to provide, and that will probably be, and to be able to explain to applicants what they need to do to provide this information.
Director Segal, got a good idea.
Can we just separate these two motions? So one is to accept option one, and the second motion is for a workshop? And can we call the question?
Director McClinton.
Like many of my colleagues, I struggled with this report just knowing which is the best option. And, it's just pretty clear that I don't think we have all the information to make an educated decision. I think, I would recommend that we even move this to the next electoral service area. Let's give this a little bit of time. We can all do a bit of our own research. We know some of the implications. I would defer voting on this until the next ESA, if that's even possible. I think Patrick isn't shaking his head, so.
Director McClinton can make a deferral motion at this point.
Madam Chair, you only have a mover. You don't even have a seconder yet.
Oh, I'll second it.
So you don't even need to do that. I would not even consider that motion, but then to consider another motion to ask staff for more information or postpone this until the next EASC for further discussion, a motion of that nature, as opposed to defeating any of the motions. there could be a motion within the workshop that you'd like, if there's consensus or that would like to do that, that might be an appropriate motion.
Carry on.
Yeah, oh, thank you. You know, I think we should just defer, because I don't even think we have total clarity around the workshop, that what it's gonna, the implications for staff in terms of resources. I just think this needs some sober time to consider all the options. That would be my.
Director McClinton needs 2 weeks of sober time. All right, so, oh, God.
So at the
I am
current-
confused here on
So
how to
currently-
handle, if we have a motion on the floor.
No, you do not. You just
Oh,
have
I thought we did.
You have just somebody that moved it, no one seconded it?
Yeah.
Yes, it was seconded.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep, it
My-
was seconded.
Oh, okay. My apologies. We were going to interrupt you to say that those motions should be separate. They're not necessarily, they're related tangentially, but they're really not germane, and I would suggest that you vote on the motions
Separately. All right.
And so
I bet we can agree on a workshop, so let's call the question on the workshop. So we need a mover and a seconder. Oh, no,
Just
we've
let-
got it.
move to second-
I
move
can
and second-
sever it, can't I?
Move and second to sever.
Okay.
Defer?
Or to postpone any of this until a future meeting is another option as well.
You would
So
like
a
to,
motion-
you would
a
like
mo-
to postpone? Okay, you like to make that motion? And you can do that over top of the.
Correct.
The one that's on the floor. Go ahead.
I think move to postpone to a certain.
I move
period
to
of time.
postpone to a future electoral service area committee meeting.
In 2 weeks?
It's in 2 weeks.
And who will second that? I will. All right, it's been moved and seconded that we would defer this till the next Electoral
Postpone.
Area Services Committee meeting, which Director Wilson will be chairing. Yes, Director Martman.
Speaking to the deferral or referral, I'm not sure which.
Deferral.
Deferral. So speaking to the deferral.
That means you have to do your homework.
No way. So speaking to the deferral, did you sever these already, or is it defer? Like, can you read what we're deferring? Are we deferring the
We're deferring
workshop
we're deferring the motion on the floor.
and the workshop?
And, yeah, the whole thing.
Okay.
Madam Chair, so you were postponing a vote on the motion, which is to consider option one and to provide for a workshop to further your education on CACs.
And when that comes forward, Director Wilson will remember that he'll have to call for a motion to sever those two things. Is that okay, Director Martman? Okay, so we'll postpone it till next Electoral Area Services Committee meeting if I have everyone voting for that. And Director Deck, are you okay? Are you following all this? I keep forgetting to look at you. Thumbs up or not?
Sorry, no, I agreed with your original proposal, which was to go ahead with the option one, and have a workshop. So that's the one I feel most comfortable with, but I don't know where that.
But you could wait 2 weeks to vote on that, could you?
I guess I could, sure.
All right, let's, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Director Martman's opposed. Okay, one last thing. One last report.
Thank you, Chair. R8, report from the Office of the CAO, read the Community Issues Assessment for South Cowichan.
Thank you, Allison. Madam Chair. So the purpose of this report that you've received, it's brief and fairly to the point, but it's to provide an overview of the proposed preliminary work to scope a future
governance study for South Cowichan. The recommendation in front of you is that it be recommended to the board that staff be directed to submit a request to the Minister of Municipal Affairs for $60,000 of grant funding to support the hiring of a consultant to complete a community issues assessment for South Cowichan, which is electoral areas A, B, and C. In the package is also a draft of the letter, which has been already reviewed by staff at the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. And I'll just note that there is a small alteration to the letter to change the $50,000 to $60,000 for the request. So a bit of backstory, and I'll keep it brief because you do have closed session coming after this. You'll recall that in 2009, there was a services and governance study completed for South Cowichan, and the recommendations of that study were to proceed to an incorporation study. And at that time, it was presented to the province, and the funding for that second stage of the incorporation study was denied. There's been quite a lot of discussion at this board table about whether to proceed again for another effort to update the South Cowichan Services and Governance Study and potentially proceed to an incorporation study again. And that was not approved as a major initiative through this past budget process, but staff did approach the Ministry of Municipal Affairs to ask if there was another way forward to do community engagement and support this and facilitate this discussion. And you'll note that it is continuing to be a discussion in our strategic planning process as well about how to move forward with this. So through that discussion with the provincial staff, they recommended an approach of funding, potentially funding. We have to request it, and then we'd wait to hear back within probably a month's time. But in completing a community issues assessment, they suggest that that would be more of an incremental approach. This community issues assessment would not look into different forms of governance for the areas, but it would gauge interest and support in the community of exploring further. And it would really be an effort to define what the problems are in areas A, B, and C for governance and provision of services. So it would, the consultant would take a look at the work that was done back in 2009, and then it would give an opportunity for the area directors and the board as well to hear from constituents in those areas to find out if there is support and if the directors would like to support moving to the next stage. So this, if you want to move this forward to the board, that is the recommendation in front of you today. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Would you like to move it, Director Acton? It's been seconded. Carry on.
Yeah, just like to thank staff for recognizing that the South has extreme pressures and in 2009 felt it and continue to feel it exponentially. And I know that all the other electoral areas have the same issues, but the scale, I think, is just starting to tip in the South even more. And I hope that we can all learn from this process, and it will eventually support us all and help move the region forward. So thank you to I was going to say Danielle, to Ms. Miles Wilson for her hard work and questions to the staff. Or to the province. I really appreciate that, and so does the community. Thank you.
All right. Any more discussion? I'll call a question. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. And it's public input period, right? Question period, right.
Question period.
Sorry.
Question period, and we have allotted 15 minutes. And first is the related items, standing items on the agenda. One question and one follow-up question. And if we have time, then we would go to matters of the public. Thank you.
Good
Welcome.
afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name's Kim Bernard, and I'd like to introduce myself as an appointed member of the CVRD Solid Waste Management Plan Monitoring Advisory Group. And my question has to do with R5 and the process that brought that recommendation forward, because I noticed in the report that the public engagement and the results of the public engagement won't be released until later this summer. And so you can imagine my surprise, or can you imagine, that's my first question, that I found out as a member of the public that this recommendation was coming forward instead of looking more closely at the hybrid model and great questions that were brought forward. And the second part of my question is the CVRD ready? I represent end users, of course, of this service. Are they ready for the wave of public engagement that's about to come as a result of today's decision? And honestly, how can we help? Because, yeah, I represent the end users, and there's going to be a wave of engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bernard. We've had quite a wave already, to be honest with you. And I think there's some financial pressures that are requiring us to move forward, make a decision quickly. Really impacts the cost of the trucks that we need to purchase one way or the other. So.
All right. Thank you. And thank you to my area director for her thoughtful input today.
Hello, Sheila Bell Irving again.
Hi.
Will we have an option out of the CVRD garbage for area A, B, and C since our directors don't support the motion? Is there an option out button?
No, there's no option out.
Okay, so will residents have an opt-out from the $300 tax charge for a service that we don't use?
Staff are exploring whether there would be, what the criteria would be for exempting you from the service. But it likely will not be just a blanket opt-out thing.
Okay, so this is just a done deal then.
Any more questions?
Hello. I feel that I can actually look at you this time instead of reading my sheet. I have a question regarding the term social procurement that came up in the discussion regarding pan disposal. So I did Google it, but it doesn't say anything about policy or give any indication about how that relates to the possibility of engaging pan in some way. Could someone explain where I would get the information?
BC Social? Yeah, there's a BC Social Procurement Initiative, and we are a part of the social procurement kind of approach. And so you could probably get information from them on that. The BC Social Procurement Initiative.
Just writing it down. Thank you. And I would like to thank the 3 directors who did vote against the recommendation today. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. Director Wilson?
I just looked it up actually, and it says here that the purpose is to support local government and institutions to implement social procurement best practices to build, interesting, community well-being and resilience. And you can look that up on, you do a search for BC Social Procurement.
All right, so that's the end of question period? Oh, one more. Mr. Evans.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. I'm Cliff Evans from Shawnigan Lake. Madam Chair, on R2, what happened to our rail or our rail and trail? Was there any information come out, or was that just an over ambitious architect drawing and putting those words into St. John's Academy rail trail?
My understanding is they're working with park staff on amenity contributions on the parks side of things. But I might be wrong, and I will check and get back to you.
That's great, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, when are we finally going to look at the problems of that we have with the regional districts, like I mentioned, A, B, and C, and D, and E, with our border lines and firefighting lines and things like that?
I don't want to second guess what will be in this issues paper if we get the funding to do it, but I think that that is all wrapped in what has to be covered. I think part of the problem with delivering services is likely the sort of the multi-jurisdictional weird boundary issue. So,
That would be great, Madam Chair, because it's really frustrating for a lot of people over there.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okey doke. Could I have a motion to move into closed? Is- Oh, I have to tell you why we're closing it, right? Yes, the Deputy Corporate Secretary will read it, because I don't read well.
Thank you, Chair. To move into closed, can we get a motion, please, that the meeting be closed to the public in accordance with the Community Charter, Part 4, Division 3, Section 90, subsections, as noted in accordance with each agenda item. CSM 1, closed electoral area minutes of June 7th. CSR 1, land disposition, that's subsection E. CSR 2 would be subsection F, and CSR 3 is subsection J and K. That would be FOI and negotiations.
I have a mover and a seconder. Thank you. All in favor? Anyone opposed? We'll move into closed in 5 minutes, because I think people have to leave pretty quick, so I'd like to get going on this.
No, leave your login just for the moment, folks. We might just be able to